Welcome to Prose Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Welcome to Pros and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast by writers for writers, because sometimes we feel like pros, sometimes we feel like coins. Sometimes we feel like cons. Fucking hell, feel like coins. All right, whoever's editing this.
Coins are nice.
I was
Sure, that
convinced
was
you did that on
intentional.
purpose.
Like,
I
that's
thought that was
definitely a
really
joke.
clever.
But it's not a joke. What does it mean?
Well, you're a con.
Okay,
Okay, you
it's-
can't say con properly.
Okay.
I think it should stay. Let's move on.
Leave it. Yeah, I love it.
And sometimes we feel like cons. I'm hosting for today. I'm Paddy Boylan. Joining me this week are Matan,
Hi.
James,
Hello.
and Ali.
Hello, and I am also a coin.
That may or may not stay in the edit.
Makes sense.
I'm making it make sense.
Now, all of us are currently in the process of writing a novel. We're at different points in the journey. Some of us are closer to the start. Some of us are finished and are now changing the tense that it is written in. So we're going to speak about something that is quite near and dear to our heart, and we're hoping can help those of you who are listening or watching who haven't yet begun your book writing journey. And we're going to give you some wisdom that we wish we had known before we've started, and we've learned the hard, painful way. So the topic for today is things that we wish we'd known before we started writing our novel.
Or maybe you started, but you're only like 20% in, so it could have been worse.
Yeah,
So,
the
I
sunk
wish.
cost hasn't got too far yet.
yeah.
Before we dive into
50%
that, it's hard to say. I got like a Schrodinger's number in, but I'm going to get to my own particular bugbears with this. Let's go around and see what each of us has been reading or writing or doing or having done to us. James, what have you been up to?
I spent a lot of the last week sitting on the couch, recovering
Yeah.
from an injury. So I was watching Top Boy.
Wait, what?
I was watching Top Boy on Netflix.
Oh, I had no idea what that is.
Yeah, it's let me think. Based in London, and it's kind of about like kind of tenement housing and heroin dealers, basically. It's about a
Nice.
couple of gangs basically selling heroin on the street. They kind of divided it into two separate seasons. So there was Top Boy that they did in 2011, and then I guess it finished, and they brought it back and did another 2 or 3 seasons just recently, which are amazing. So I ended up watching the second half of it that had come out recently, and then going back and watching the first half because it's a lot of the same characters. It's sort of just they just have 9 years pass in the middle. It was very, very good. I really loved the dynamic of that kind of gangster show because you've got the character motivations and the plot, which kind of causes the action, but then luck and chance and per execution can play out in the action. So the plot can go a different direction altogether. Whereas when you're watching most stories, if a character takes action, it feels a lot more like their action will have the desired consequences or they'll completely fail. Whereas in a show like that, stuff can come in out of nowhere and it still feels authentic and it still feels like everything is rolling along. So it makes it super unpredictable from moment to moment. So I really enjoyed that.
Good structural breakdown shit. We haven't even started the main body of the podcast, but that was good.
Cheers.
Juicy stuff.
That was good.
Matan, what have you been doing?
I'm almost done with The Bear, the Nightingale, which I started
Okay.
quite a while ago.
What's the Bear and the
Um,
Nightingale?
It's I don't want to call it dark fantasy, but it is fantasy. Let's just call it fantasy. Which is mostly based on Eastern European folklore.
Oh, cool.
It was written by an American writer that spent, I think, a gap year in Russia and got inspired by it and dove in. As a non-Eastern European, I find it absolutely charming. Maybe someone who's more familiar with the folklore would be like, that's not what that thing does. But for me personally, I love it. My favorite thing about it is the writing. it dances on the edge between too flowery and just flowery enough. It's like it's not Patrick Rothfuss level of flowery when people have a gaze of hard steel and are as polished as Riverstone, but it is quite flowery and I do like it.
Beautiful.
Good recommendation.
Yeah. Ali, what have you been doing?
I was writing wise, I'm right in the middle of a writer's room for Metropius. You guys have heard me talk about Metropius.
Right. Do you want to go over this again for the audience, those who might not know what Metropius is?
For many years in the pipeline now. But out there, you can find a 20-minute animated short film, which is kind of a proof of concept for a larger series animated TV show we've wanted to pitch for a while now. And there's also a branching storyline comic book, issue 1, and there will be 4 issues of that comic book kind of closing out that mini arc. But what we are doing now is working on the pitch materials for this bigger TV show version of the animated show, because the producers are hoping to pitch that one in Annecy at the end of June. So I'm actually working with a pretty cool LA writer over Zoom. We've been doing Zoom writers rooms with each other back and forth. He's great. He's got DreamWorks credits. He's got Rick and Morty credits. So
amazing.
He's bringing some cool comedy to it.
It's not something that it's not something that I'd inherently call funny. It's sort of a dystopian, dark diesel punk future. I mean, writers are, if not versatile, but how much humor are you expecting him to bring?
That's kind of been an intentional part, like small pivot in the tone that we're choosing to do with this new pitch document. Is the world's still the same? It's still quite a gritty, dark world with life and death stakes and grungy stuff, but I guess just a bit more satire to how we're approaching the commentary on the world. And also the core characters are this rompy, they're thieves, they get up to shenanigans, they get into trouble, there's drugs and mayhem. So it's kind of that's the comedy of the characters in this dark and dangerous world, I guess, is kind of the new tone we're trying to hit. I don't know if I pitched that well. We're still in the middle of pulling that apart.
I'm intrigued.
But
I was a fan of what it was, so I'm really curious to see this new direction for it.
I guess it's almost by going with new protagonist is what has done this. So the world's still the same, but previously we had quite a straight, serious detective trope type lead character. So that kept it quite grounded. This wasn't a character who was, humor wasn't one of his core traits. But now we've got a protagonist where humor will be one of their core traits. So that's just already giving it a different sheen, a different vibe, different energy that we're, leaning into.
Nice.
Yeah. And aside from that, as you mentioned, I'm rewriting Cypress. That's still going. I'm very close. I'm only about 10K words away from the end. I want that done by the end of the month.
You can bring not only did I wish I knew before I wrote, but you can bring what I wish before I rewrote my novel.
Yes.
That's a pretty unique perspective to the conversation, I think.
Before I did this latest draft, I wish I knew. But as opposed to other things I've been consuming, I've been able to get to the movies a lot quite recently, which has been nice because there's been a lot of the big blockbuster releases I've been meaning to catch. So caught Guardians 3 in cinemas recently, caught the new D&D movie in cinemas, and also John Wick 4. And I kind of want to say out of all 3 of them, they were all quite enjoyable, but something about John Wick 4 I actually really fucking loved.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
That's the one of all of them I want to go back and rewatch first.
Would you call it a beautiful ballet of violence?
It's great gun fu.
Yeah, definitely
gun
good spectacle.
Fu.
Yeah.
And I have a theory about the John Wick universe I wanted to pose to all of you. I'm probably derailing this. But our running joke when our household when we watch it is we don't think anyone in the John Wick universe has a real job. The entire economy is an assassin economy. You are either an assassin
everyone.
or you work for the assassins.
But there's people that work behind the bar in the grungy nightclubs, right?
Yeah, but
so
they
clearly
work
there's
for assassin. They are aware of the assassin
okay.
economy.
Okay.
So they're paid by people to give drinks to people who are in the assassin economy. The only people we posit, so even like all the taxi drivers know they're just driving around either assassins or people who work for assassins. Like everyone's in on it. Just the hierarchy of working for assassins, except teachers, because there's only 2 examples of school teachers which are painted as the innocent people of the universe. One is the fucking wife in John Wick 1 who dies. She was a teacher, I'm pretty sure. And then in 4, there's a scene where they're going through a train station, and some people like give them a side eye because they're in on the assassin economy and they know John Wick's an assassin and he's chasing an assassin. But the only people who don't give them the knowing side eye is a school teacher leading through 10 school-aged kids through the train station. So we're like, she's the only innocent in this entire world of the assassin economy. So our theory is, you're a kid, you're born in the John Wick universe, you go to school. The assassin economy will look at, say, the 20 kids in the classroom. They're going to pick 2 of those kids to be school teachers. Everyone else in that classroom now enters the assassin economy and are aware of the assassin world.
I think this deserves a YouTube video, a full breakdown of the scene.
Being a school teacher is the only innocent job in the entire universe. They're the only people who go through life not being aware of the assassin.
But you're telling me that they're kept in the dark. Is that the idea?
Yes. So only school teachers who educate children are the only ones in the dark.
As
a
school
teacher, the protagonist of the next film, then is the school teacher finding out
that
the
would be
whole
so
world
good.
Just finding
just
out.
run on assassin jobs.
Then you tell the Matrix plot of the school teacher working out they've been living in assassin world their whole life. Everyone else knows about the assassins and serve the assassins. Anyway, that's my theory on the John Wick universe. Go and watch it again. There's no one else in that movie aside from school teachers who aren't aware of the assassin economy.
And drink every time you hear assassin economy.
Yeah. I'm TM. Ali is trademarking this term. That's going to be my next.
I actually do think this sounds like good
trademark.
episode fodder, man. Like if nothing is going to make a YouTube clickbait title like John Wick is the assassin economy.
Yeah.
We can do this. We can make it work.
Or here's why only the teachers are not aware of the assassin economy.
Yeah, it's only the teachers. Yeah. So I think because it gets my imagination going to try and make sense of the fucking stupid universe world building in the John Wick universe is why I'm so engaged with it more than Guardians, more so than the D&D movie, because I'm like, I need to work out how this makes sense and how people make money in this world. I need to know.
There you have it. Look forward to the Assassin Economy episode by Pros and Cons coming soon. Getting this train back on the rails, because I think it's gone off into the forest now.
Not sorry.
No, that was important. That was important information. I'm not saying the train shouldn't have gone into the forest, just that, the passengers need to eventually get to the station. And the station is talking about what we wish we'd known before we started our novels. None of us here have, I don't think anyone here has published a novel, correct? No. We've written them. Ali, have you finished Majesty?
I'm going to say no, because I'm going to go back and I'm going to edit that bitch again. So no, Majesty's still in work.
Matan, you finished
I was going
the
to scream
correct?
yes when Ali was about to say no. I was going to cut her off and say, she finished it. But anyway, I did finish a novel. Wow, I finished a novel. How crazy is that?
Woo!
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to finish the second one soon. Yeah.
You will finish the second one soon.
Oh yeah, I have to.
I have this thing where I think I've finished it, and then a couple of months later, from distance, I change my mind, and I'm like, I can go back and edit that. I'm yet to break.
Who
that
can stop
cycle. Me? Yes.
And James, you're juggling a few things, is that right? Like, I know about several ideas for novels that you have, and I know you've been writing several. Is that more or less? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pushing ahead with a Scavenger's Tread at the moment, and I'm going to try to pick up Bring Bardo again in July. And I've been tooling around with a third thing as well. But
Ooh,
Bring Bardo
it's the third.
and the third thing are sort of around 10,000 words, first couple of chapters written. Not sure where the plot is going after this. Kind of have an idea where it ends, but the whole middle of the story is open to needs a bit of planning and needs me to kind of push ahead and try and structure it. So
planning.
I'm learning a lot from writing Scavenger's Tread for like this exact topic. The things I should have known when I started and things that I will put into my planning for the other two novels when I pick them back up.
Yeah. Alex, one of the co-hosts on this show, not on this episode today, he reads a lot about writers and writing. He's a real font of wisdom when it comes to this stuff. And the more he drinks, the more he'll talk about it. It's fantastic. He was saying once that there was... He read some piece of advice that's something like, if you... And how much this applies, I don't know, but I thought it was interesting. If you pour your heart and soul and everything you have into your first novel, you should probably know in advance that your first novel probably A, won't be great, or B, just won't do that well, because it's your first novel and it's such a tiny fraction of writers whose first novel is amazing and does really well. I mean, we can name some, but the only reason why we could name them is because they got famous. So it's sort of a self-selecting group. We don't hear about the stories of novelists whose first novel was just kind of flat and didn't go anywhere. So I think there's something to be said for just like getting your maybe trash out of the way. If you've got some worse ideas, write them first and then save your absolute Da Vinci piece for when you've got a little more
even on
experience.
that note, some writers whose first novel is extraordinary, is it really their first novel? I'll chuck Patrick Rothfuss in here. He took 14 years to finish The Name of the Wind, and by his own account, by the time he finished it, it wasn't really the book he wrote at the beginning. He's basically been writing the same book multiple times. So it is titled and maybe even has the same concept as his first book, but it's like the metaphor about the ship, the allegory.
Yeah, the ship of Theseus, right? That's what I was just thinking.
Exactly.
The ship of Rothfuss.
Is it still the same?
What is that metaphor?
Theseus went on a sea voyage and his ship was damaged and repaired and damaged and repaired. And when it came back, some beard-stroking philosopher said, but is it the same ship you set out with? Because it's, I don't know, it's got none of the original parts or something.
Every part's been replaced. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
No, that's interesting because I've heard what you're saying, Paddy. I've asked myself that as well. Like, should my first crack at a novel have been something I care less about? But that's counterintuitive, because then the other advice we always get is like, you have to write the thing that excites you most. Like it almost has to be the thing you care most about, especially if it's your first novel, because you've got to, dangle the carrot in front of the donkey. Like it needs to be an idea you're very excited about, that you care about, to not only get through the hard work of putting the first novel down, the first draft of the first novel down, but also if you're not invested, like, how can you ask other people to be invested in it as well? If it's not the most entertaining thing you think you can create, is it going to entertain others? So I'm with you. I've felt that personal tension as well, that do I just need to write a practice book, but then I don't want to diminish the quality. It still needs to be the thing I'm most excited about, most passionate about at the time. I think how I've learned to articulate it to myself is something I wish I had known with my first crack at Majesty is my first book doesn't need to do everything that I can do as a writer. So it was less about, this work needs to demonstrate that I can do a bit of this, I can do this, I've read this, I can play with this technique. The first book doesn't have to showcase the full skill set. It was more retraining how I thought about it as, well, let's just pick one thing and do that very well, rather than attempting all the things, because there will be other books to do the other skills really well.
That kind of it is acknowledging upfront that, yeah, there's some things that aren't going to be absolutely 10 out of 10, and maybe that's the best way to approach it. Matan, you having actually written a full book, and now you're writing Absolution, your second one, is there stuff that you've taken into Absolution that you've learned from the first one? Like, are there things that you've learned not to do or that you wish you'd done?
Absolutely. Uh, Look, the first book I wrote in about 2 months, and the
Really?
reason I wrote it in yeah, who would have thought?
Wow.
The reason I wrote it in 2 months is that my writing, okay, I just finished my military service. I didn't really have much to do. I just was working some shift in the night in some hotel, and that was about it. I would wake up in the morning, write. Every Friday, my mom and my brother would read what I had written during the week, and as great as they are, you know, neither of them is a native English speaker. Neither of them is a voracious reader, and but they liked it. And then I took it to Australia to the writing group, and for the next 2 years, I just heavily edited that manuscript until I pushed it to the point where either a either I was just not interested in it anymore after 2 years of heavy editing, or maybe, and I think it's more of the second one, after receiving some rejections, because I did take it the whole path. I took it to agents, sent it to publishing house. I did not abandon it, but I did like, okay, I got 10 rejections, some of them nice, some of them very generic. Time to move on. And when I got to my second book, I think there were so many lessons about writing, but if there's one that really stuck to me, and I still think about it to this day, I don't think it applies to all books, but check me, it does apply to most of them. Scenes are not as long as you remember them. You're thinking about scenes from your favorite books, you're thinking about conversations, and in your head they're like a movie, and they're very dramatic, and they have all these back and forth. Open on the page, I challenge you. Sometimes it's just 1 or 2 pages, your favorite conversations. Sometimes it's a paragraph and a half of actual talking, and the rest of it, like, people don't actually say, hello, how are you, and grab pieces of the page for that. They just kind of get to the point.
Yeah.
And it's hard to remember that because in our memory, our memory just blooms and we have all these extra things, and we watch a lot of movies, and in movies scenes are sometimes allowed to breathe and they take more space. So that's one thing I would recommend to people who are writing, because most of our writing is informed and inspired by books that we remember reading. Open your favorite book, open your favorite conversation. Unless it's Tyrion from A Song of Ice and Fire, it's a short one.
So is the takeaway lesson to err on the side of keeping scenes terse and to the point?
Exactly.
Right.
The same could be said for similes, metaphors. There are less of them than what you think.
Yeah.
In a published book, in a published non-literary novel.
I'm feeling something similar with that. This isn't about something I've written, but Hilary Mantel, I'm reading the Wolf Hall trilogy. Everyone knows this. And I'm constantly impressed by the information that she leaves out. She will never say he walked across the room and looked around and saw XYZ. She'll just go straight from one scene to, and then he's talking to the king. It works so well. And it's making me think like, yeah, a lot of that middle stuff really doesn't need to be there. And by comparison, I'm editing this work at the moment, which it's fine, but it's very like I got up from my chair and pushed it back, and then I walked across the room to my boss's office, and then I knocked on the door and he opened it. And a lot of those details probably didn't need to be there.
There's a purpose for that, for time dilation. You need it sometimes. You need it for the horror elements, you need tension. If the boy is going to confess to the girl, you want to drag it out. You want to milk it. You do want to have him go and, pick up the phone and push the keys to. You do want that. But I think young writers, new writers, we turn to abuse time dilation. Not because we're meaning to, but just because that's how we remember scenes, In my head, of course he went to the door, opened it, and then picked up the phone because there's a door in the way. But that's my my thought on the matter.
Similar to that, a point I jotted down to myself, something I wish I could go back and tell myself on my first draft, is that I am allowed to tell. Like I feel like it gets bandied around so much. Show don't tell.
Yes.
And I don't know if this is uniquely a me problem, but I don't think it is. But coming from screen, like all we do is show. Like there is no tell. Tell was a new tool to me it's not a native tool I know how to use. So I was writing everything dramatized, which I think is kind of what you're describing, Matan. Everything's happening in the moment. The scene is playing out in real time. And this idea that I could step back, use prose to pull back and move time along as quickly as I need it to kind of as elegantly as I can move to the next thing, as seamlessly as possible, and link it only through interiority or linking it through emotions or a logic train of thought rather than dramatized moment to moment things. This is a tool I'm trying to embrace more now in the current Cypress redraft I'm doing, in that I hope I'm pulling it off, but the very last scene I wrote, I started in kind of real time dramatized, and then I leap back into Will's thoughts. He's thinking about a moment the night before by the fire. A little bit of that's dramatized. I have some dialogue, and then I come back into real time where he is, and then that scene plays out, and I'm like, this would be very silly to try and do this in a screenplay. This is something that is only native to the book medium, because I'm using telling to be able to transition like that between thoughts and moments. And so that's the new tool I'm learning and embracing. And I think I would go back and tell myself, that almost feels like the art of writing a novel. And I didn't quite get that the first time I was writing Majesty. Majesty was very scene by scene by scene. And when I say that Majesty's not finished, that's because I would like to go back and give it another read with this kind of new framework in mind, this new thinking I'm doing now, and see if there are moments I can elegantly tell the story rather than show every moment, and maybe cut some of the word count while I'm at it.
I guess that's almost one of the benefits of being at the beginning of a journey and not having any published books is, we say things we wish we'd known, but ultimately what's to stop us from going back, and if something's unpublished, we have free reign to just work on it and change it as needed. James, you're writing a few different things at the moment.
Yeah.
Are there ways that like A informs B and B informs C? And
yes, I definitely feel like Scavenger's Tread is kind of me trying to get the discipline of writing regularly, and also the process of having a functional story from start to finish, because I've spent so much time writing the first half of things and so little time writing the end, and having the two ends meet and it makes sense in the end. So definitely I'm kind of in between, to go back to what you were talking about earlier, pouring your heart and soul into the first novel. I really, really care about the other two stories that are kind of like side projects, but I'm a little bit intimidated to dive right in and start trying to write those to completion, because I'm still having stuff come up with Scavenger's Tread where I'm like, oh, I should have considered this from the very beginning, and I should have wrote with this in mind from the jump, because now I have to go back and, like, in order to make this story work, in order to make this story better, I have to redraft an awful lot of it. One of those things is, and I guess you kind of miss this maybe in your first, particularly the way I write, because I kind of am a bit of a pantser. You might make promises early on that then don't, that's just something you put in, and then you're like, oh, well, I don't need to really have that as the main part of the plot. But then you kind of write the story on, but then realize that that promise is very important to the plot, but isn't really delivered upon later on. So you have to try to think about, is there another way for me to have the plot happen in the same way, or do I have to now create a subplot which alleviates that promise? A big part of Scavenger's Tread is that it's a story set in I feel like I should just have like a sign that just says post-apocalyptic zombie settlement, which has an outbreak of the zombie virus, and then this all gets blamed on one person who runs away, and the story is then kind of about a manhunt after this person, but it's left a little bit unclear where the outbreak actually started. So I kind of feel like I do need to create a subplot with two other characters where that is at least tied up, or that is at least answered by the end of the story. Otherwise it could feel too much like the beginning of the story is going to be about who actually was responsible for the outbreak in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good point. You don't want it to seem like a whodunit when that's not what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Which I feel like an awful lot of the back and forth of them blaming this character and this character arguing that it wasn't her creates that sense of, oh, well, now the story will have to involve them finding out who it is, and will they begin looking or will they not? What happens is the character just runs away and they, for different reasons, they chase after her. So that's one thing that I'm kind of trying to pay attention to in my writing. But the main thing that I'm dealing with Scavenger's Thread at the moment is thematic argument, because I felt like I had a good grasp on theme. But I'm kind of learning that in order to make a really strong theme in a story, you want the back and forth of that, the conflict within the team to develop as the story goes on. I might even do an episode on this maybe later in the year when I have a better understanding of it. But what I'm learning at the moment is that it isn't enough to just point to the theme throughout the story. What I've had it described as is there's sort of a dividing line, and that is the theme and then the anti-theme. And all of the characters in the story are on one side of this line or the other, but your main character is wavering between the two. And it's almost like there's an angel and a demon on each side that are arguing. They serve as arguments throughout the story. So this makes the theme, it's not just a set thing from start to finish, it's something which evolves and you learn more about it as it goes on. And then towards the end of the story, your character will end up on one side or the other, either, you know, depending on whether or not they choose to go with the team. They often get what they need in that story. Or if they go with the anti-team, they may get what they want because they followed their flaw. And that can be how that works out. I use the example of Titanic, I think, as a good example of explaining this. If we take the theme of kind of class conflict, all of the characters were on either the lower class or the upper class, whereas Rose was sort of being pulled between the two with everyone she met. And although this was, you know, the plot involves this, like this is kind of separate from the sinking of the ship, but the sinking of the ship is the catalyst that makes her eventually choose to go with Jack because she's being lowered down in the boat and choose to go that. You can also argue that the theme was love, and that kind of plays out as well. So I'm noticing that the main character in Scavenger's Thread spends a significant amount of time by herself in the middle of the story because she's being chased. So there isn't really a way that I can see to play with this theme. Whereas the character who is leading the chase is constantly around other characters. So I'm wondering if I might need to change the protagonist of the story and maybe change the way the story flows a little bit, because I was looking back on it and trying to say, what's the dividing line in this story that each of the characters are on one side or the other? So I think I found one, but it will involve a change of protagonist. So
I know, I love that
Well
you brought
said.
that up, because I'm right in the middle of having made that crystallization with Cypress, so only a couple of months ago. So how long have I been writing this bastard? But it finally, something wasn't clicking in my head about the theme, or if I knew the theme, it was something that was, you know, like buried inside me and I hadn't articulated yet. And it was only in this very latest draft that what you're talking about, James, this idea that I knew I had a story about a boat and stealing a boat. Great, that's plot. And then I also had like these love interests around. There was love story happening, and it hadn't quite crystallized for me what the boat story had to do with the love interests and what the theme was and the things Will wanted, like just to really neatly tie that together. And for me, it became really clear that Susie, the wife, represented certain ideals that sometimes Will gravitated towards, and then the other love interest, John, represented other ideals that Will at other times would lean towards. If Susie represented redemption and someone's ability to change their ways. So every time he like thinks of making the right choice, changing, being a better person, I'm now associating that with memories of the wife, of Susie. And then other times I have John, who represents kind of this nihilistic acceptance of who he is. These are his traits. He's going to keep making the same mistakes again and again. So when I have him regress, now I have him think of memories of John. And so that the moment the two love interests represented that dividing line, the thematic push and pull that my protagonist has to choose between, suddenly I'm like, I think I know what this book is about now. And this was something that only crystallized for me this very latest draft. So I'm I feel like I'm 5 years into playing with the idea, 2 years actually writing it.
Yeah.
And now this latest draft, I have that thematic crystallized in my head. So I definitely, if I was to be like something I should go back and do before I started this, maybe it's hold on to the theme, get the theme right before you sink several years into this. But I think I'm the kind of writer that I need to write it to work out the theme. I feel like I can start with a theme in mind, but it's only going to come to me when I'm in the mess, when I'm in the muck for a good long time.
I think we talked about that a lot in our episode about themes. I don't know if it was you that mentioned it, but we talked about sometimes we don't know what the theme of what we're writing is until we finish it. And I think we don't even always know what the theme is once we finish it. Sometimes it's up to the audience to say like, oh, well, this is clearly the theme. But you saying that's the theme of Cypress, that makes total sense to me.
I'm glad.
Yeah,
because that makes me think it's always been there, because you've read a very early version of it, so it's always been there in some form. But now that I can articulate it to myself, I can be very deliberate in this latest draft and make it very clear that's what's going on, and I can help it inform structure and how it unfolds now. So it's a good feeling now that I'm at the pointy end, but it's if I had known that from the start, it would have been a much faster process.
About theme, I just want to say we had an interview with an author at university in my English literature class, and one of the things he said is that he usually writes the first draft and then he gives it to his beta readers, and that sometimes it is the beta readers who actually tell him what they think the theme is. He doesn't tell them.
Yeah.
And he said on more than one occasion, he actually found himself changing his mind and agreeing with the beta readers, like, oh, no, actually, this is what my book is about.
Yeah.
This is actually, because our intention, this is going to sound harsh, our intention don't really matter. What matters is what is on the page, what is down there in the words, what can be understood by the readers. What we set out to do, that's nice, but what we actually have on the page, that's the real thing. That's what people will really take from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. So I'm gonna take it back to this idea of subplots, which I think Ellie and James, you mentioned. One of the issues, okay, well, to back up a little bit, I really wish I'd planned out my novel more before starting. I had something of a plan, and that was quite new to me because I was more of a pantser before. I had I think I know the beats I want to hit and the big scenes, and I know how it's going to end. I'm going to fill in all the blanks. But I thought, wisely as it turns out, I'm going to have some kind of a plan this time moving forward. A lot of people say they have ADD, and to an extent, everybody does a little bit, arguably. I do have ADD, right? And I have a tendency in big projects to go off on side tangents and pursue side tangents. It's really hard for me to follow a set laser beam straight plan. And I've been writing this thing, and I thought, well, it'll be fine if I deviate from my plan in this way and this way. Now I've got something like 100,000 words. The book's not even halfway finished. And I've got so many subplots that I think I'm ultimately going to have to sacrifice. And it hurts because some of this stuff I really like. And some of it I think is worthy of pursuing. But unless this book is going to be absolutely gigantic, I can't keep them. So what I'm going to have to do now is, I'm doing this now. I've got this mentorship, which I'm really grateful for. And that's keeping me accountable. And I think we should actually do an episode on accountability in writing, because I know I got to go to my mentor and deliver her all the scenes I've got and all the material I've got. And it's going to have all these little notes saying listen, I don't think I'm going to keep this. I don't think this is going anywhere. This character here, maybe ignore this guy because that kind of sucks. And it's making me realize that, what I should have done is had a really rigid plan and stuck to that and been more disciplined. Ironically, if I'd kept to my theme, the theme that I knew I had, it would have led me on a more straight path. I don't know if you guys have encountered anything like that. We've all got different processes, but especially...
Can I just ask, was the theme your original inspiration for writing the story?
Yeah, I've always had a really... Okay, I'm quickly, for those who don't know what the story's about, the guy is main character, suburban man, he fears that society is on the brink of collapse. It could fall apart at any moment, and he is doing everything he can to protect himself and his family from that eventuality. So he turns his house into a suburban fortress, and he gets very slowly more politically radicalized, etc., etc. The idea has always been rock solid in my head. I know exactly what I want to happen in the end, etc. So, yeah.
That's quite like what Ali was saying, because you had your story, Ali, and then the team was sort of there, even though if you weren't aware of it. And Paddy, I guess you were writing a story and the team was informing that. And then if you decided to change the theme, the story that you had in some way informed the original team and maybe didn't inform or maybe didn't work with the new team that you brought in. So that can be,
I think pretty much, yeah.
I guess theme kind of unconsciously can affect the story that we're writing.
We talk about this a little bit in TV writer's room and TV structures. So we talk about televisions having story engines, in that if you create enough, like an exciting enough central conflict and exciting enough characters, this is an engine that is going to keep bouncing off each other. These elements will keep bouncing off each other and creating conflict and drama until the end of time. So that's how you would pitch a television show. You don't pitch it with a clear
episode topic. Story engines.
Yeah. Because you wouldn't pitch it as a clear beginning, middle, or end, because then you've pitched a feature film. You haven't pitched something that can keep generating content. And the idea of theme then, and having a very clear idea of what your show is about, is because you've got this engine that in theory can generate infinite storylines over here, over here, over here. So how do you as the writer's room curate which stories you're actually going to focus on episode to episode? When you can go in many different, are these characters going to fight this episode? Are these going to, like in theory, they would naturally come into conflict over that. Is it worthy of us writing a whole episode about that? The question you ask is, well, is it in conversation with the theme? The theme becomes the thing you curate what you generate by. So a bunch of writers in a writer's room tossing out all these ideas. Great, we spitball this, we put that up on the wall, that on the wall, that on the wall. Once you've generated all that content, let's go back to the theme, take a step back. What's the show actually about? Okay, that conflict does highlight the theme. It is in conversation with the theme. The characters are pushing, pulling that. Great, that does deserve a whole episode. That one will be funny. That's entertaining. That's high stakes. Yeah. Is it about the theme? No, we can leave that on the cutting room floor. So it's
kind of the lighthouse beacon that you have to stick by, right, in order to not go way too out.
Back. And that kind of, it sounds like that's what you're grappling with, Paddy. You do have something that can generate all this interesting stuff, but now you're taking the step back and being like, well, is it in conversation with the through line? And you have to be like, oh God, I don't think it is. Maybe it's going to end up on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, it sucks. It really sucks. I'm just thinking back to all the time that I'm not going to say wasted, but I probably would have something closer to a finished manuscript by now, and I'm starting to feel, well, I've got past the point where I'm feeling burnout. I was feeling a ton of burnout for this because I've been writing for ages, and I feel like it's just getting bigger and not resolving itself. Now that I've had a break, I can come back and apply the things that I wish I'd known and focus it a little bit more.
I've talked about rumination before, I think on our creativity episode, but I'm such a big believer in the time away from a project and coming back, in that your brain has been working on it in the background, even though you're not aware of it. And again, it's because this is me saying, I finished Majesty, and then I've not touched it for, God, it's almost been a year. And now I'm itching to get back to it, because even though I haven't been actively thinking about it, I know inherently now what that manuscript needs to take it to the next level. I'm ready to tackle it. And I say I've been writing Cypress for 2 years. Obviously, that hasn't been 2 years nonstop. I've been doing other things. I put it down for 3 months. I come back to it. And in the 3 months is when I work out what it needs, even if I'm not thinking about it actively. In a 3-month break is when I made the very silly but good decision to be like, what would happen if I rewrote it in first person? And then I've been pursuing that, and I it's kind of untested. It's a bit scary, but I think it is in its strongest form that it's been so far to date. So that's reassuring. And I guess another thing, a slight deviation, but speaking to speculative fiction, and I think we do have a lot of speculative fiction listeners primarily, because that's kind of the core of what Precipice Fiction have been doing, is when I set out to write Majesty. So there's kind of this, another phrase that gets bandied about is, write for yourself. If you care about it, then other people will care about it. But I had to learn very quickly that that's a lie. Because
Oh, you think so?
for speculative fiction, what got me really excited about writing this world was I get to show off all my world building. I get to talk about how this character was related to this character, and maybe that hints at how 2 generations later they have some tension. I might find that infinitely fascinating, and everyone else on the planet is going to find that fucking dim and boring, and they don't want to read about that. And I think it is the speculative fiction first time writer bitter pill to swallow, that no one really gives a shit about your incredibly detailed world building. It can be fascinating, it can inform, it can be impressive when you see a very well built world. People like to be immersed in it, but at the end of the day, no one wants to read your encyclopedia on your world building.
Probably not.
Sadly.
I mean, George Martin sold Fire and Blood, so.
But even then, I read Fire and Blood because I'm like, that character's fucking nuts, and he did what to those kids? And that's what makes me turn the page.
Fire and Blood is a perfect example of, in your head, you remember it as this ultra detailed movie with scenes, and in reality it's like a Wikipedia article.
Yeah.
So
but I could find it really fascinating that they built a religion around constellations and spend 3 paragraphs on it, and those are the first 3 paragraphs that are gonna have to get cut because no one cares. I'm only saying this because that's what I have to now tell myself.
That's what the listeners have to hear.
Yeah, it's what I had to hear.
Matan, sorry, go ahead, Ali.
No, I got to say, I think a lot of people get into speculative fiction because we love world building. We love well-built worlds, and then we love the excitement of building our own worlds. But then it's just remembering that we're writing a story at the end of the day. When you actually sit down to do fingers on keyboard, you're writing the story. You're not it's not a vehicle for showcasing your world building. You're telling a story.
There's a whole Facebook group that I'm part of called the World Builders Sanctum, and it's full of people that just endlessly iterate on their worlds, and they'll post this huge, long post about all the stuff they've done, and like 3 people like it. I think the lesson is like, yeah, you actually got to write some stuff, man. You can't just. But you're doing it, Matan. You are writing the book, and on the book. So we have a Facebook Messenger group where we back and forth and talk to each other about our stuff. And we can see that Matan has recently adopted this elaborate system of post-it notes, digital post-it notes, in order to organize his
digital
thoughts.
post-it notes.
Yeah. Was there some kind of realization that you came to during writing that made you go, shit, I need colored rectangle stat?
Okay, let's be like 25% honest and say that shit is just fun. Okay, let's put it on the table. I love it, I enjoy it, but listen, a lot of times when we write, especially if we want to sit down and get our word quote for the day, like get our 2,000 words or 1,000 words down, sometimes we cut corners. Like we'd put a character, we won't exactly know why that character is there, but we just kind of need it for that second. And the post-it notes help me put the stuff that I didn't write in my head. For example, I don't need it to be in the book that character was abused as a child, and that is why he's nice to the young protagonist. But I need to remember that as a writer because that informs the way my character behaves. Now, I'm not going to write a spin-off about that character being abused as a child, but I feel like my writing is more solid because otherwise it's just floating in your head. You're like, oh yeah, he's doing it because of that. But 3 weeks later or a year later, when I come to edit, I don't remember that. And I look at his behavior, like, why is he behaving that way? So the post-it notes help me keep it organized. I also use them for world building. I think one of the notes is how much a bread costs, just to have like an anchor to go about. Yeah, Ali knows what I'm talking
This
about.
is why
I
you
think.
should never start writing a fantasy book. Like that's your life from that point on.
Oh God, you know how many? What a rabbit hole, man. Anyway, I think as far as world building goes, I love it. It is fun, but it is not what you set out to do. Like Ali said, people will only care about your world building if they care about the characters occupying that world. They will not, it doesn't matter how cool your version of dragons is. What matters is the person the dragon is trying to burn interesting? That's what really matters. And in the end of the day, a lot of people can come up with interesting worlds. It's maybe some better than others. It is a talent. I'm not underestimating it. But a lot of people could sit down and come up with some cool shit. But it's the ones that make the characters alive with conflicts, with hopes, with dreams, with obstacles. These are the worlds that we end up hearing about because they're occupied by interesting characters with real problems. And at the end of the day, humanity, I believe, is the most interesting part of any story, like the people going through stuff. You look at Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, all the world building he's done. I believe he said in interviews that when he started writing it, he had no idea about any of that stuff. He was just tossing things in the air, writing about a bunch of boys finding wolves in the forest. And it did start with the Starks, with the family, with there's a bastard kid that nobody likes. There's a son that is afraid to appear as weak. There's a king that's coming to ask for a favor that the Lord doesn't want to do. Basically, writers who haven't started their books, know your characters, what matters to them, what they need, what's in their way, and then worry about how much bread costs.
Yeah, on that, if I had to go back and tell myself something I wish I'd learned when I was writing my first book, or had known, speculative fiction and fantasy is starting in hard mode. So it's writing now in historical fiction in my second novel has been so much easier. So between you and me, this world exists. If I can Google the price of bread in the year to find that out. There are facts. If you're writing contemporary, the world is built. You just show it.
Yep.
Building a world alongside simultaneously building interesting characters and plot is just an extra feat that, you know, we do it because we love it. We love this genre, but it's just being aware that you're starting your first novel on hard mode. So and going easy on yourself. I'm not saying to avoid it, but when it suddenly seems really hard, that's why you've started the game on hard mode rather than easy mode. Historical fiction is easy mode because
it's like that. Sorry, please finish your thought.
Yeah, just because I get to focus on character, on how can I make this plot work within, you know, a plot that it has already kind of been gifted to me by real people 200 years ago, and I can just highlight the interesting parts.
You know that advice, the best diet you can go on is the one you'll actually stick to. It's that for writing, right? The best book you can write is the one you'll actually write. And sometimes you can bite off way more than you can chew. We're going to take a very quick break, and we'll be right back with more nuggets of wisdom. And we're back. We hope you enjoyed your break as much as we enjoyed ours. I wanted to ask you guys all a question. Now that we've had some more experience, and no doubt being writers, we're already looking at the next thing we want to start writing. When you start your next book, what are the big takeaways that you want to bring to it? Like before you start, what are the things that you really want to apply that you've learned from writing your current or your last thing? Because I've got a ton.
I got two things, real quick. One thing I'm sending all you listeners to the really fantastic podcast episode James did on mystery. Look it up; it was really good. Is have a lot of secrets in your novel.
We haven't published that yet.
I don't think that's come out yet.
Then, if you have a time machine,
you
don't need a time machine. Just need to wait in the future.
Get hype for it.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's gonna be great.
Paywall.
Anyway, have a lot of secrets. Have a lot of secrets in your novel, but constantly divulge the truths. You cannot just have secrets. You cannot just have secrets and keep them all and you know nothing, reader. You got to slowly give them something. You got to have a trail of breadcrumbs. You got to pace yourself. Keep the juicy ones for the end, and give some false truths, make them think they know the secret. Oh, wait, actually, it's not what you thought. And the second thing is flavor. A lot of us with our character sheets, we're so excited to show you how this character is tough, this character is a coward, this character is honest. So we think, how are we going to show it? We're going to have a scene showing that this guy is tough. And the whole purpose of that scene is to make that guy look tough. No, flavor must go in scenes that belong in the story. Try to have the flavor show in the plot, in scenes that were there anyway. I just think that if we have scenes solely for flavor or atmosphere, they usually don't go anywhere. So try to incorporate it with scenes that are actually part of the organic plot.
That's kind of also making writing more economical, right? There's something to be said for, like, if you can use an existing scene or an existing character or an existing plot point to do something rather than introducing a new one, you've solved two problems.
Yes.
Yeah, make your work harder, have it achieve multiple purposes at once. Yeah.
James, what about yourself? I mean, I know you're already juggling 3 pieces, so it might be a while before you start on a new piece, but you've surely got some things that you want to try for next time or want to avoid.
Absolutely. Well, definitely when I continue the 2 novels that are currently on the back burner, it's actually Matan's advice on like having a strong idea of the character from when you start. I think you do need a rough idea or plan for what your plot is. I have found that it's very useful to know not just what your team is, but what your thematic conflict is going to be. What's that dividing line that the other characters are going to be on either side of, and your character is going to be wavering on. I do think you need to have those things, but if you, as Matan said, start with your character and have a character that you love and care about and know, that is what's going to bring you through from the start to the end. Because those 2 novels that are currently on the back burner, the reason that I'm hesitant to go back to them is because they both involve main characters that I love and know really well and find very easy to write. It's just a matter of finding what is their adventure, what is their story going to be about. So that I'd piggyback on Matan's advice of knowing your character.
What about you, Ellie, when you've finished the umpteenth version of Cypress?
Yeah, I feel like I've got a really boring answer. So I want to have a crack at a standalone, because that feels outside of my wheelhouse because I keep writing these series. But if I am to approach that standalone, I think I would structure the hell out of it before I start. And I would want to know the theme before I start, because I'm like, this is a standalone. I don't want to spend 100K working out what it's about. I think it's going to be one of these ones where I want to know what it's about, what the thematic push and pull is before I think I'll challenge myself to know it as well as possible, because it's standalone, that I can hold that all in my head at once. And I would even understructure it, because I now know that my habit as a writer is I'm going to overwrite. If even I'm like, this is a structure, I'm following Save the Cat, I'm following the hero's journey, I followed the structure, I've beated it all out. And if I do it to that degree, I know about my own writing that I'm going to have too many words at the end. I just know I'm an overwriter. So in my next plan, I'm going to underbeat it. I'm going to almost plot a novella length thing, and I know I'll end up with a 80 case. So I guess my only other advice would be to know if your habits, learn your habits. Are you an underwriter? Are you an overwriter? So you can start to like put rails around yourself as you dive into the next one. You can try and control what to navigate around, what you would accidentally gravitate towards. So I know that I know theme is a weakness, so I'd think more on theme, and I know overwriting is a weakness.
Yeah. Mine is really similar to yours. Like, writing this thing, I feel like Charlie Day with the big plot of like diagrams and things doing each other, and he's got the cigarette. Yeah, I'm going a little mad with how much I've overwritten this, and I really need more discipline to stay on track. And what you said just then, Ali, about like plan for novella length, I think that could really work for me because I inevitably go off on tangents, and I'm gonna develop extra things. If I keep it really small, that fractal will only get so big.
Yeah, it's like tricking yourself.
Yeah, pretty much. So, you gonna say something, Matan?
No, I just, no, keep going.
Okay.
Feeling
I'm just
That's
enjoying,
it, Alina.
us all descending into, I'm gonna trick myself, I'm gonna hypnotize myself.
I don't know. It
'Cause-
seems kind of necessary.
Because if I could, I wouldn't rewrite at all. It's a disease, It's like
When you
I
say
get it right the
rewrite,
first time.
you mean like drafting? Yeah.
I just feel like drafting is too much fun for me, and I'm just like it's funny, like each of us has a different issue. Like Ali says she overwrites. I don't think she overwrites as much as she thinks she overwrites, but
We can't see everything
Paddy,
that's on the cutting room floor, I guess, as well, right?
Remember
That's fair.
how big I said the first draft of Majesty was?
Oh
That
yes,
unholy word count. Yeah. Look, Cypress wasn't that bad, but Cypress still needed a 40K
Cypress was tight.
haircut.
Okay.
I'm still desperately trying to cut 10K out of it.
Is there a thought you wanted to finish there?
I just
you
meant
go
like
ahead.
we each have our thing, like Ali says she overwrites. Paddy, I suppose your story, from what it sounds like, it's like it going in all these different directions, find interesting, which are great, but then like how are you going to close it, because you got all these doors you opened, and James, he's got these great ideas, but like maybe you've got too many ideas, James, because you keep
I feel
coming
like
up
I've
with
got the
new ones.
same thing as Paddy, because I've got like, oh, that's the
Yeah.
plot, but then I'm like, oh, but I need this sub character.
But that could be the plot, and
in order to accomplish
could
the plot.
also be the
Yeah,
yeah.
the separate plot starts in the middle, and then I'm like, oh, this is just a mess. It should just be a book of short
like-
stories.
If you know how you say sometimes if you combine a lot of people, you'd have like the perfect something. So with us, it's not combining. It's if you reduced something from all of us, you would have.
So that's why we Voltroned ourselves and created the new Mythic, which you can go buy from Amazon.
We
We've got
actually
an
all
audiobook
wrote
coming
all
out
the
soon.
stories.
Ebook, paperback. It's the best part of all 6 of us in the new Mythic.
That's right. The
That's
new
great.
Mythic
None of the
available
weakness.
now.
What if J.R.R. Tolkien is actually 4 people? J.R.R. and Tolkien. Wouldn't that make sense?
Yeah, I cracked it, man. Shit. Speaking of things
Good for
we're
one
doing that you guys should definitely check out, Ali, are we attending some kind of big public event sometime this year?
I think we are.
What?
Are we? What?
It'd be alarming if we didn't know. So yes, in June, if you're in the Sydney catchment area, it is the weekend of June 17th, 18th, which is also my 30th birthday weekend. So now you've got no excuses not to come visit us. We've got a stall at Sydney Supernova Precipice Fiction. And by we, I mean Alex and I, because we'll be the 2 in the country at the time. Everyone else will be international. But come along, say hi to us, grab a copy of the new Mythic. And we've also got a few we're also selling art from the book, which is really cool, art prints. And we'll also have audio snippets. Alex has been doing the music for the audio book. So there's audio snippets. It's going to be a visual fun feast, our little Precipice Fiction stall. So
That's
please
right.
come along. Say happy birthday to me. It's also
and
going to be
Vivid
Paddy's
Cost-
birthday, but Paddy won't be there.
I
But
won't be there.
Worth knowing that it's also Paddy's birthday weekend.
And
So now
also,
that
if you're in the Sydney area, Vivid now costs money. So Supernova is free entertainment.
Yeah.
it's not free, but I like that sentiment. you will have to pay. to
Save
attend
money
Vivid.
on Vivid, spend it on Supernova
Yep,
instead. Come and
there you
make our
go.
stall look
There
busy.
you go.
Meet Ali and Alex in person. They're even better in the flesh.
wish them a
Yeah.
happy birthday. I mean, wish only Ali a happy birthday. You can wish Alex a happy birthday.
anyway.
Could be wasted on him though. And the other bit of exciting news is then the first weekend of June, we're doing a Precipice road trip to Canberra because it is the Aurealis Awards, and our own Matan is nominated for an award, and
Yes, he
Phoenix is nominated for an award.
Yes,
But
he is.
because they're overseas, it is the Sydney locals who will be representing Precipice Fiction as publisher,
That's right.
going along to receive their awards if they receive them. Otherwise, we will happily applaud the people who beat Phoenix and Matan.
And Ali, these award-winning stories, is there somewhere that listeners can find these stories and read them for themselves?
I think there is. You can jump onto Amazon, and if you type in Precipice Fiction or the New Mythic into Amazon, you'll find an ebook or paperback. We're trying really hard now, but we're excited, guys.
We are.
Honestly, look, this is the culmination of several years of hard work. I've been talking about Majesty nonstop. Matan's been talking about Absolution. So, like, literally, if you want to know more about those worlds and the exciting world building and constellations and shit, the Stolen Sword and Glyphlight touch on the world building of the stories we've been discussing in today's podcast. So,
Absolutely.
we're never not in those worlds. We've been with them for a long time, in conclusion.
Well, this has been good. I think we've learned a lot about each other's processes, and definitely I feel like this has helped me solidify some things that I already had in my mind. Talking out this stuff out loud has actually, made me kind of realize I got to take some action on some things.
Oh, sorry, my internet cut off. I'm back.
You're back. I was praising your
I'm
excellent
back.
story, Glyphlight.
Oh,
Would have been
thank
the only
you.
thing you did.
I just wanted to say that if me or Phoenix actually win, I fully expect a 3 a.m. video call to wake me up, all right?
Okay.
Like, don't let me wait for the morning. If I wake up, I want to know, okay, I woke up naturally. It's probably because we didn't win. But if I hear the phone ringing...
What we're actually going to do is wheel out a TV onto the stage, and you think it's just going to be us, but you're going to be addressing the entire audience and take your acceptance speech at 3 a.m. Yeah.
I'm going to ring you and be like, Matan, guess what? You didn't win, but it was an excellent night.
All right.
Ali, do you want to close us out with a quote?
I've got a quote. So on what we've been talking about, things we wish we'd known, we have a quote from Mark Twain. I made the comment that I think this is a very gendered quote, but I'm going to read it as is anyway, because maybe I don't quite have the standing yet to edit Mark Twain's words without his permission, but
Humble.
I'll just judge him from afar. Right. A man who is not born with the novel writing gift has a troublesome time of it when he tries to build a novel. I know this from experience. He has no clear idea of his story. In fact, he has no story. He merely has some people in his mind and an incident or two, also a locality, and he trusts he can plunge those people into those incidents with interesting results.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. Sounds like his problem is being a man. I mean, he's kind of phrasing it that female writers don't have this problem. So cool.
Yeah.
There you go.
I guess that's one interpretation. Yeah. Well, listeners and watchers, thanks very much. This has been Precipice Fiction, and we will see you again next time with more delicious wisdom nuggets. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You're listening to Pros and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.